Successful business owner and St. Charles County native. Her story so great, but cut so short. She was murdered by her husband, and tonight this woman's family and friends not only mourn, but vow to fight. And that fight is for Carrie Hardin's children. There is a clash for custody for her 8 and 11-year-old boys.
That crime happened in the family's Atlanta home. The custody fight is also there. And tonight, here in St. Louis, Carrie's friends and mother are talking to us about the issues before all of this tragedy. First Alert 4's Russell Kinsall here with that story. Russell.
Yeah, the victim, Carrie Hardin, such a smart, hard worker. She had already saved for a car at the age of 14 and a half. She was brutally murdered after years of hiding from others the domestic violence that she suffered. Advocates for victims of domestic violence hope others will hear this story and they will reach out for help.
August 2024, Fayette County, Georgia. A successful nurse and entrepreneur carefully reviews job offers from VA hospitals across state lines. Carrie Hardin, 40, maps out apartment locations near good schools for her 2 young sons. She calculates moving costs, researches neighborhoods, and plans for a future where she and her children can thrive away from the mounting tension at home. These weren't idle dreams. They were methodical plans backed by the same determination that had built her nurse staffing agency into a multi-million-dollar business. Carrie was a woman who solved problems, who found solutions where others saw only obstacles. When faced with a troubled marriage, she chose action over acceptance. She chose safety for herself and her boys. But on August 20th, as Carrie prepared for this new beginning, her husband Kenneth Hardin Jr. made a devastating choice of his own. Days later, investigators would make a grim discovery behind the family's home on Merlin Court. In a shallow grave lay the remains of a woman who had once nursed others back to health, now silenced by 9 gunshot wounds. The body had been partially burned in an attempt to destroy evidence, a final indignity inflicted upon a woman whose life had been defined by compassion and care. The man responsible wasn't a stranger who broke in during the night. He wasn't an unknown assailant who attacked in a parking lot. He was the father of her children, a 3rd-generation minister, the man who had stood before God and family, promising to cherish and protect her. What happens when the person who vowed to love you becomes your greatest threat? When the sanctuary of home transforms into the most dangerous place you could be? When leaving becomes both necessary for survival and the catalyst for violence? Say her name. Carrie Hardin. Welcome to Say Her Name, where we tell the stories of Black women whose cases deserve more attention, whose legacies deserve to be honored. Today, we examine the life and death of Carrie Hardin, a devoted mother, successful businesswoman, and compassionate nurse whose plans for a new beginning were violently cut short by domestic violence. This isn't just a story about how Carrie died. It's about how she lived. It's about a woman who once used her college textbook money to help a friend pay overdue electricity bills, then worked extra shifts to replace those books. It's about a mother who put her children's safety above all else. It's about the courage it takes to leave a dangerous situation, and the devastating reality that the most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship often comes when a victim attempts to escape. As we share Carrie's story, we invite you to consider the warning signs that preceded this tragedy and the changes needed to prevent similar losses in the future. Her life mattered. Her death matters. And the lessons we can learn from both might save someone else's life. Where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments as we honor Carrie's memory and ensure her name is not forgotten. At 40 years old, Carrie Hardin had built a professional legacy that many spend a lifetime trying to achieve. Her career began in nursing, a field that aligned perfectly with her natural compassion and desire to help others. As a registered nurse, she developed expertise that earned her respect among colleagues and gratitude from patients. But Carrie's vision extended beyond bedside care. Recognizing both a market opportunity and a chance to address staffing challenges in healthcare, she founded her own nurse staffing company. This venture wasn't merely a business for Carrie. It was a solution to a problem she had witnessed firsthand throughout her nursing career. Under her leadership, what began as a modest staffing agency grew into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. The success didn't come easily or overnight. It required meticulous planning, relationship building with healthcare facilities, recruitment of qualified professionals, and the management skills to ensure both clients and staff remained satisfied. Colleagues noted her exceptional work ethic. Carrie approached challenges with a problem-solver's mindset, often working long hours to ensure her business ran smoothly while maintaining the high standards she set for patient care. She understood that behind every staffing placement was a healthcare facility that needed support and patients who deserved quality care. Her business success provided financial stability for her family and created employment opportunities for other healthcare professionals. The growth of her company demonstrated not just her business acumen, but also her ability to identify needs within the healthcare system and develop practical solutions. Even as her business responsibilities expanded, Carrie maintained her nursing credentials and connection to direct patient care. This dual identity as both healthcare provider and entrepreneur gave her unique insights into the industry and kept her grounded in the mission-driven aspects of her work. By August 2024, Carrie's professional accomplishments had positioned her with options many don't have: the financial independence and professional credentials to relocate and start fresh. Her nursing license and extensive experience made her marketable across state lines, a fact that would prove crucial as she planned her exit from a troubled marriage. Above all her professional accomplishments, Carrie's most cherished role was that of mother to her two sons, aged 8 and 11. Those who knew the family described her as deeply devoted to her boys, structuring her busy life around their needs and development. Despite the demands of running a successful business, Carrie prioritized being present for her children's milestones and daily routines. She helped with homework, attended school events, and created stability in a home that, behind closed doors, was increasingly tense. The boys represented both Carrie's greatest joy and her most significant concern as her marriage deteriorated. Friends noted how she shielded them from the adult conflicts in the household, maintaining a sense of normalcy even as she privately made plans to leave. By summer 2024, those plans centered entirely around creating a safer environment for her children. The job opportunity at a VA hospital out of state wasn't just about her career. It represented a chance to give her sons a fresh start away from the tension they had begun to witness at home. Carrie researched schools in the new location, looking for districts that would support her children's educational needs and provide extracurricular opportunities. She considered housing options that would give the boys stability during the transition. Every aspect of her relocation planning reflected her primary motivation: her children's well-being. What made her actions particularly poignant was her understanding of what her sons would temporarily lose in the move: proximity to extended family, familiar surroundings, and community connections. Yet she determined that these sacrifices were necessary for their long-term safety and emotional health. The timing of her planned departure in August 2024 aligned with the school year, allowing her children to start fresh in their new community, a detail that highlighted her thoughtful approach to motherhood even in crisis. The foundation for Carrie's compassionate nature was laid early in her life. Raised by her mother, Yvonne Smith, she grew up understanding the importance of resilience and kindness. Yvonne instilled in her daughter values that would guide Carrie throughout her life: education, hard work, and generosity toward others. Perhaps no story better illustrates Carrie's character than an incident from her college years. When a friend faced having their electricity disconnected due to overdue bills, Carrie didn't hesitate to offer help. She took the money she had saved for her own textbooks and gave it to her friend to pay the utility bill. This wasn't a casual gesture from someone with abundant resources. Carrie needed those textbooks for her own education. After giving away the funds, she picked up extra shifts at work to earn enough money to replace what she had given away. This combination of immediate compassion followed by determined self-reliance became a pattern in how she approached life's challenges. Those who knew Carrie described her as someone who listened actively when others spoke, who remembered details about people's lives, and who offered help without being asked. Her nursing career wasn't just a profession, but an extension of her natural inclination to care for others. Even as her business grew successful, colleagues noted that Carrie remained grounded and accessible. She treated her employees with respect and understanding, recognizing their challenges and working to create a supportive work environment. Family members, particularly her mother Yvonne, spoke of Carrie's loyalty and dependability. She was the person relatives called in times of need, knowing she would respond with both practical assistance and emotional support. By mid-2024, Carrie's dreams had crystallized around a specific vision for her future. The position at a VA hospital represented not just employment but purpose, a chance to serve veterans while providing stability for her family. The decision to leave Georgia wasn't made lightly. It meant stepping away from the business she had built, distancing herself from extended family, and navigating the complexities of relocating with 2 school-aged children. Yet Carrie approached this challenge with the same methodical determination that had characterized her professional life. She envisioned a home where her children could play without tension filling the air, where everyday routines weren't overshadowed by conflict. She pictured herself continuing to grow professionally in a new healthcare setting, perhaps eventually establishing another business in their new community. What made Carrie's plans particularly courageous was her clear-eyed understanding of the risks involved. Statistics show that leaving an abusive relationship is often the most dangerous period for victims. Yet she persisted with her preparations, believing that the long-term benefits of escape outweighed the immediate dangers. Friends who were aware of her plans noted her careful approach. She didn't broadcast her intentions widely, understanding the need for discretion. She gathered necessary documents, made financial arrangements, and researched resources in her destination city. The job offer from the VA hospital represented more than employment. It was validation of her professional worth and a tangible path to independence. It allowed her to frame the move positively for her children, focusing on new opportunities rather than what they were leaving behind. Carrie's aspirations weren't extraordinary in their content. Safety, stability, professional fulfillment, and a healthy environment for her children. But the context in which she pursued them required extraordinary courage. She sought not wealth or fame but the basic security that many take for granted, a home free from fear. To understand the events of August 2024, we must first understand the man Carrie had married. Kenneth Hardin Jr. came from a family with deep roots in their local religious community. At 39, he represented the 3rd generation of ministers in his family, following the path of both his father and grandfather before him. This religious lineage granted the Hardin family significant standing in their community. To outsiders, Kenneth appeared to embody the values his position suggested: devotion to family, moral leadership, and spiritual guidance. He was active in church functions, spoke with authority on matters of faith, and presented himself as a family man committed to his wife and 2 sons. But behind closed doors, a different reality existed. The public persona of the dedicated minister contrasted sharply with the private behavior of a man struggling with control and anger. While the full extent of their marital problems wasn't visible to the community, those closer to the family had glimpsed concerning dynamics. The marriage had become increasingly strained over time. What began as tension and disagreements had escalated to a point where Carrie no longer felt safe. The specific incidents that led to this deterioration weren't publicly documented, but the outcome, Carrie's determination to leave, spoke volumes about the severity of the situation. Kenneth's position in the church complicated matters. The expectations placed on pastoral families often create pressure to maintain appearances and resolve problems privately. This cultural context may have initially discouraged Carrie from seeking outside help or made her hesitant to disclose the full extent of their problems. For Kenneth, the prospect of his wife leaving represented not just a personal rejection, but potentially a public humiliation that would undermine his standing in the community. His identity was deeply intertwined with his ministerial role and the perception of having a stable family life. Warning signs had accumulated over time. While specific incidents weren't detailed in public records, the pattern followed a recognizable trajectory of escalating control and conflict. What makes Carrie's story particularly tragic is how it illustrates that domestic violence crosses all socioeconomic and professional boundaries, affecting even those who appear successful and established from the outside. By summer 2024, Carrie had reached the difficult conclusion that remaining in her marriage was no longer tenable. The decision to leave wasn't made impulsively, but after careful consideration of her options and the potential consequences. The specific events of August 20th remain known fully only to Kenneth Hardin Jr., as Carrie is no longer able to share her perspective. What is clear from investigation records is that on this day, the simmering tensions in the Hardin household boiled over with fatal consequences. The day likely began routinely enough. A Tuesday in late summer, with normal household activities and work responsibilities. But at some point, a confrontation erupted between Carrie and Kenneth that would escalate beyond any previous arguments. Based on Kenneth's later statements to investigators, the trigger for this final confrontation was his discovery of Carrie's plans to leave Georgia and take their sons with her. The prospect of losing both his wife and children, and the public implications of such a departure, proved unbearable. What began as a verbal argument intensified rapidly. Words gave way to physical violence in a pattern that has been documented in countless domestic homicides. The critical difference in this case was the presence of a firearm, which transformed a volatile situation into a lethal one. In the heat of the confrontation, Kenneth retrieved a gun. Whether this was a premeditated action or an impulsive grab in the moment, the result was the same. He fired multiple times at Carrie, who had no means of defending herself against the barrage of bullets. The autopsy would later confirm the brutality of the attack. 9 separate gunshot wounds to Carrie's chest, torso, and arms. The multiple shots indicated not a single moment of rage but a sustained assault, each pull of the trigger representing a separate decision to continue the violence. The location of the wounds suggested Carrie may have raised her arms in a defensive posture, trying to shield herself from the attack. This instinctive self-protective gesture proved futile against the firearm. The sons' whereabouts during this violent episode weren't specified in public records, but the timing, a weekday in August, suggests they may have been at summer activities or with relatives. This timing may not have been coincidental. Kenneth may have waited for a moment when the children were absent to confront Carrie about her plans. In the aftermath of the shooting, Kenneth was faced with the reality of what he had done. The successful nurse, entrepreneur, and mother of his children lay dead in their home. A home that had once represented their shared future but had become the site of an irreversible tragedy. With Carrie dead, Kenneth's actions shifted from violence to concealment. Rather than contacting authorities or seeking help, he made calculated decisions to hide evidence of his crime. His first step was to address the most immediate problem, Carrie's body. He couldn't leave it in the house, where it would be quickly discovered. Instead, he moved her remains to the backyard of their Merlin Court property, selecting a secluded area for burial. Before interment, Kenneth took the additional step of partially burning Carrie's body, an attempt to destroy evidence that might link him to the crime. This act of desecration added another layer of horror to an already tragic situation, revealing the lengths to which he would go to avoid consequences for his actions. After burning the remains, Kenneth dug a shallow grave behind their home and buried what was left of the woman who had once been his wife. The hasty nature of the burial suggested urgency, a recognition that time was limited before questions would arise about Carrie's whereabouts. With the immediate evidence concealed, Kenneth made another significant decision: to flee. Rather than remaining in Georgia, where questions about Carrie's sudden absence would quickly emerge, he drove approximately 450 miles to Covington, Louisiana. The choice of destination may have been strategic or simply the result of putting distance between himself and the crime scene. What is clear is that Kenneth checked into a motel in Covington, perhaps believing that time and distance would insulate him from suspicion. But even as he attempted to escape the consequences of his actions, Kenneth made a decision that would ultimately lead to his capture. He contacted his father, Kenneth Hardin Sr., and confessed to killing Carrie. This confession to his father represented a pivotal moment in the case. Perhaps driven by guilt, religious conviction, or simply the need to unburden himself to someone he trusted, Kenneth revealed what he had done. He may have expected understanding or assistance from his father, a fellow minister who had guided his spiritual development. If so, he miscalculated. Kenneth Hardin Sr., upon hearing his son's confession, faced a moral and legal dilemma. Despite the family connection, he made the difficult but necessary decision to contact authorities immediately. The elder Hardin's 911 call set in motion a rapid sequence of events. Law enforcement in Georgia began investigating the Hardin residence, while authorities in Louisiana were alerted to Kenneth's location. The elder Hardin's decision to alert authorities couldn't have been easy. As a father, he was betraying his son's confidence. As a minister, he was exposing a horrific sin committed by someone who shared his calling. As a grandfather, he was setting in motion events that would forever change his grandsons' lives. Yet his moral compass pointed clearly toward justice for Carrie. Within hours of receiving this call, Fayette County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the Hardin residence on Merlin Court. The property appeared ordinary from the street, a family home in a respectable neighborhood, giving no indication of the horror it concealed. Deputies secured the scene and began a methodical search of the grounds. Investigators focused on the backyard area, where disturbed earth suggested recent digging. As they carefully removed layers of soil, the grim reality emerged. Human remains, partially burned, in a shallow grave behind the family home. The victim was quickly identified as Carrie Hardin, missing for less than 48 hours at that point. The county medical examiner's team processed the scene with painstaking attention to detail. Every piece of evidence required careful documentation. Soil samples, burn patterns, and the position of the remains all told parts of the story. The body was transported to the medical examiner's facility for a complete autopsy. The forensic examination revealed the brutal nature of Carrie's death. She had sustained 9 separate gunshot wounds to her chest, torso, and arms. The multiple impact points indicated that this wasn't a single moment of rage but a sustained attack. The wounds to her arms suggested defensive posturing. Carrie had tried to protect herself from the barrage of bullets. Burn patterns on the remains indicated an attempt to destroy evidence after death. This calculated act of concealment pointed to a killer who was thinking clearly enough to take steps to hide his crime, contradicting any potential claims of a momentary loss of control. As investigators processed the crime scene, they also began piecing together Carrie's final days. Her plans to relocate for a new nursing position, the preparations she had been making, and the life she had envisioned for herself and her children all came into focus. The tragedy deepened with the realization that she had been killed just as she was about to escape. Even as the investigation at Merlin Court unfolded, law enforcement agencies across multiple states coordinated efforts to locate Kenneth Hardin Jr. His father had provided crucial information. Kenneth had fled to Louisiana and was staying at a motel in Covington, approximately 450 miles from the crime scene. The distance suggested premeditation rather than panic. Kenneth hadn't simply driven until he ran out of gas or crossed the nearest state line. He had traveled a significant distance, perhaps believing that putting hundreds of miles between himself and the crime would provide safety or time to plan his next steps. Louisiana authorities were immediately notified, and a tactical team was assembled to approach the motel with caution. Given the violent nature of the crime and the possibility that Kenneth might be armed, officers planned for potential resistance. They secured the perimeter of the motel and developed a strategy for safe apprehension. The arrest itself was anticlimactic compared to the brutality of the crime. Kenneth offered no resistance when officers entered his motel room. He surrendered without incident, appearing resigned to his fate. The minister who had once preached about righteousness and redemption was handcuffed and read his Miranda rights. Louisiana officers secured Kenneth in custody while Georgia authorities made arrangements for extradition. During this process, Kenneth remained surprisingly cooperative. The man who had taken such elaborate steps to conceal his crime and flee the jurisdiction now seemed willing to face the consequences of his actions. This cooperation may have stemmed from various sources: the unburdening that came with his confession to his father, religious conviction about truth and consequences, or simply the recognition that the evidence against him was overwhelming. Whatever the motivation, Kenneth's demeanor during arrest contrasted sharply with the violence he had exhibited toward Carrie. The journey back to Georgia gave investigators initial opportunities to question Kenneth about the events of August 20th. While formal interrogation would wait until he was properly processed in Fayette County, these preliminary conversations revealed his willingness to discuss what had happened, a willingness that would prove crucial to understanding the full scope of the crime. Once back in Georgia and formally charged, Kenneth participated in a recorded interview with investigators. His confession, delivered in a composed manner that disturbed even veteran detectives, provided a window into both the events of August 20th and the mindset that led to Carrie's murder. Kenneth admitted to confronting Carrie about her plans to leave Georgia and take their sons with her. He had discovered her preparations, perhaps finding job correspondence, overhearing phone calls, or noticing subtle changes in household arrangements. The realization that his wife was planning not just to leave him but to take their children to another state had triggered both anger and fear of loss. According to his statement, the argument escalated quickly. What began as accusations and denials transformed into a heated exchange about their marriage, their children's future, and Carrie's right to leave. Kenneth described feeling a sense of betrayal and humiliation at the prospect of being left behind, emotions intensified by his position as a minister and the public nature of such a separation. The most chilling aspect of Kenneth's confession was his description of retrieving the gun. This wasn't portrayed as a momentary impulse but as a deliberate choice. He acknowledged going to where the weapon was kept, returning to the argument, and firing multiple times at Carrie. The 9 shots, each requiring a separate pull of the trigger, demonstrated sustained intent rather than a single moment of lost control. Perhaps most disturbing was Kenneth's description of his actions after the shooting. He recounted the decision to burn Carrie's body, the process of digging the grave, and his flight to Louisiana with a detachment that suggested compartmentalization rather than remorse. These weren't the frantic actions of someone in shock, but the calculated moves of an individual attempting to evade consequences. Throughout the confession, Kenneth displayed an awareness of what he had done without appearing to fully grasp the moral weight of his actions. He could articulate the sequence of events, his motivations, and his subsequent choices, but the emotional disconnect between these statements and the horror they described was profound. This confession would later form the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, eliminating any question of who had committed the crime and focusing attention instead on the appropriate consequences for such a deliberate act of violence. While Kenneth's confession provided a narrative framework, forensic evidence corroborated and expanded upon his account. Ballistics analysis confirmed that all 9 bullets recovered during the autopsy came from the same firearm, a weapon registered to Kenneth that was recovered during the investigation. The bullet trajectories told their own story. Forensic experts could determine the approximate positions of both Carrie and Kenneth during the shooting based on entry wounds and bullet paths. This analysis supported the theory that Carrie had been trying to shield herself from the attack, raising her arms in a defensive posture as multiple shots were fired. Burn patterns on the remains and trace evidence from the burial site matched Kenneth's description of his attempts to conceal the crime. Accelerant residue indicated the use of household materials to partially burn the body before burial, a detail that aligned with his confession. Digital evidence provided additional context. Cell phone records tracked Kenneth's movement from Georgia to Louisiana, confirming the timeline he had described. His phone had been turned off during critical periods, suggesting an awareness of how such devices can be used for tracking. Investigators also recovered evidence of Carrie's relocation plans, including correspondence with the VA hospital, housing inquiries in the new location, and research on schools for her sons. These materials confirmed the motive Kenneth had cited, his discovery of her imminent departure with their children. The physical evidence at the Hardin home told the story of a life interrupted. Carrie's personal belongings, partially organized as if in preparation for packing, remained in the residence. Her professional documents, including nursing credentials that would facilitate her employment in another state, were found among her possessions. Perhaps most poignantly, investigators discovered materials related to her son's education, records she would need for their enrollment in a new school system. These documents underscored that Carrie's plans had been centered not just on her own escape, but on creating a new life for her children. The totality of evidence, forensic, digital, and physical, created a comprehensive picture that left no room for alternative theories. Kenneth Hardin Jr. had killed his wife upon discovering her plans to leave, had taken deliberate steps to conceal his crime, and had fled the jurisdiction in an attempt to avoid consequences. What do you think drives someone to harm the person they once promised to protect? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
I never imagined that something like this would happen to Carrie. You know, it's like, no way.
Carrie was too big for this to happen to her.
Alicia Allen and Chastity Adams Miller are still in shock over their friend's brutal murder.
So the most impressive thing about Carrie was she always wanted to improve on things. He had bust out the window to the bathroom to get to her and chased her down the road with the gun.
I asked her mother why Carrie never left Ken.
She wanted to keep her family together, and she believed that he would stop, that he wouldn't really harm her.
From the couple's home outside of Atlanta, hours before her murder, Carrie texted her friend Alicia asking if she could come stay with her.
I'm not going to call the police because, I'm just afraid that something bad will happen out of it, and I just want to go to sleep, and I'm going to lay down and hopefully nothing happens.
Carrie Hardin had taken a job at Cochran VA Medical Center and contacted a divorce attorney. Ken Hardin's accused of shooting his wife with a shotgun, burning her body and burying it in a shallow grave.
It breaks my heart that I didn't call the police for her.
A GoFundMe account has been set up to help with the legal battle to settle Carrie's estate and seek custody of the couple's 2 children.
That's where Alicia and I are having a call for justice for Carrie to make sure that happens.
In the wake of this tragedy, victims of domestic violence are urged to call a hotline, to get information, to make a plan.
Because honestly, if someone has never had to think about that before, then, why would they know? If you don't need to know, why would you know? So you need folks like us who can kind of talk you through, here's some options, and then helping that survivor guide what they want to do, what's right for them.
The wheels of justice turned deliberately in the case against Kenneth Hardin Jr. from his arrest in August 2024 until resolution in June 2025. The legal system processed the evidence, evaluated the charges, and moved toward accountability. Initially, Kenneth faced multiple serious charges: murder for taking Carrie's life, concealing a death for his attempts to hide her body, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime. Each charge carried significant penalties under Georgia law, with murder being the most severe. Given the overwhelming evidence, including Kenneth's own confession, forensic findings, and the calculated nature of his actions after the killing, prosecutors built a formidable case. The 9 gunshot wounds, the burning of Carrie's body, and his move to Louisiana all pointed to both the brutality of the crime and consciousness of guilt. As the case progressed toward trial, Kenneth and his legal team faced a stark reality. The evidence left little room for reasonable doubt, and the nature of the crime offered few mitigating factors. In June 2025, nearly a year after Carrie's murder, Kenneth made the decision to plead guilty to all charges. The plea hearing in Fayette County Superior Court brought Carrie's family face to face with her killer. Judge Kruziger presided over proceedings that, while lacking the drama of a contested trial, carried profound emotional weight for all involved. During sentencing, Judge Kruziger did not mince words in condemning Kenneth's actions. The court noted the particular mercilessness of the crime, not just the taking of Carrie's life but the violation of trust implicit in domestic violence. The judge emphasized how Kenneth had betrayed his role as husband, father, and spiritual leader in the community. The sentence reflected the severity of the crime: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This maximum penalty ensured that Kenneth would never again walk free, providing a measure of security for Carrie's family and acknowledging the deliberate nature of his actions. As Kenneth was led from the courtroom to begin serving his sentence, the legal chapter of Carrie's story closed. Justice, in its formal sense, had been served. Yet for those who loved Carrie, the conclusion of legal proceedings marked not an ending but a transition to the longer process of grief and remembrance. The ripple effects of Carrie's murder extended far beyond the courtroom. For her mother, Yvonne Smith, the loss of a daughter represented an inversion of the natural order. Parents should not have to bury their children. During the sentencing hearing, Yvonne provided testimony virtually, her words carrying the weight of both personal grief and concern for her grandsons. "The pain doesn't lessen," she told the court. "It just changes shape." She described sleepless nights, moments when she reached for the phone to call Carrie before remembering she was gone, and the struggle to support her grandsons through a loss no child should have to endure. For Carrie's sons, aged 8 and 11 at the time of her death, the trauma was multi-layered and profound. In a single act of violence, they lost both parents, their mother to death and their father to imprisonment. The boys faced a future without the mother who had centered her life around their well-being, forced to process not just grief but the knowledge that one parent had killed the other. Child psychologists who work with survivors of family violence note that such trauma can affect development, academic performance, and the ability to form healthy relationships later in life. For Carrie's sons, the road to healing would be long and complex, requiring specialized support and the steady presence of extended family. The murder created what mental health professionals call multigenerational trauma, emotional and psychological wounds that can be passed down through families. Carrie's mother now faced not only her own grief but the responsibility of helping her grandsons navigate theirs. The boys would grow up with questions about identity, safety, and trust that most children never have to confront. Extended family members, friends, and community connections became crucial in creating a support network for the children. These relationships offered continuity and stability during a period when the foundations of their world had been shattered. The financial implications added another layer of complexity. While Carrie had built a successful business, her sudden death created questions about inheritance, ongoing management of her company, and resources for her son's future needs. These practical matters had to be addressed even as the family processed their emotional loss. Carrie Hardin's story, while unique in its specifics, reflects patterns recognized by domestic violence experts. Her case highlights several critical lessons about prevention and intervention that may help others in similar situations. Warning signs of escalating domestic tension often exist long before violence turns lethal. Changes in behavior, increasing isolation, expressions of extreme jealousy or possessiveness, and threats related to separation are red flags that should never be dismissed. In Carrie's case, her decision to leave suggests she recognized the danger, even if others in her circle may not have been fully aware. The most dangerous time for victims of domestic violence is during separation. Carrie's murder occurred precisely when she was preparing to leave, a pattern documented in numerous studies of domestic homicide. This timing underscores the importance of safety planning and support during the separation process. Early intervention can be life-saving. This includes both professional resources, counseling, legal protection, shelter services, and community support. Faith communities like the one the Hardins belong to can play a vital role in recognizing warning signs and connecting families with appropriate help. For those in positions similar to Carrie's, contemplating leaving a potentially dangerous relationship, resources exist. Domestic violence hotlines provide confidential guidance on safety planning. Legal advocates can help secure protective orders. Shelters offer emergency housing for those in immediate danger. The role of bystanders cannot be overstated. Friends, family members, colleagues, and community connections may notice concerning dynamics before the person experiencing abuse fully recognizes the danger. Asking direct questions, offering specific help, and remaining connected can create lifelines for those at risk. Faith communities face particular challenges in addressing domestic violence. The emphasis on marriage preservation must be balanced with safety concerns, and religious leaders need training to recognize when counseling is insufficient and professional intervention is necessary. Kenneth's position as a minister likely complicated this dynamic, potentially making it harder for Carrie to seek help within their religious community. Prevention also requires addressing broader cultural factors that enable domestic violence, challenging beliefs about control in relationships, promoting healthy conflict resolution, and ensuring economic opportunities that allow financial independence for those who need to leave unsafe situations. Though her life ended tragically, Carrie Hardin's legacy continues through the impact she had on others and the lessons her story offers. The nurse who once used her textbook money to help a friend in need would likely want her experience to help others facing similar dangers. Her professional accomplishments remain significant, building a multi-million-dollar nurse staffing company that created employment opportunities and addressed healthcare needs in her community. Former colleagues and employees carry forward the standards of excellence and compassion she established in her business. The entrepreneurial spirit Carrie embodied serves as inspiration, particularly for women seeking to build businesses while balancing family responsibilities. Her success demonstrated how determination and vision can overcome obstacles and create meaningful professional impact. Perhaps most importantly, Carrie's story now serves as a powerful reminder of both the reality of domestic violence and the importance of supporting those at risk. By understanding what happened to her, others may recognize warning signs earlier, take threats more seriously, or reach out for help before violence escalates. For professionals who work with families in crisis, healthcare providers, educators, religious leaders, and law enforcement, Carrie's case highlights the critical importance of recognizing risk factors and responding appropriately to disclosure or signs of abuse. While nothing can undo the tragedy of August 20, 2024, Sharing Carrie's story ensures that her life is remembered for more than just its ending. She was a daughter, mother, nurse, entrepreneur, and friend whose 40 years left an indelible mark on those who knew her. If Carrie's story has touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to ensure her name and legacy live on. By spreading awareness, you might help save someone else's life. Remember that behind every statistic about domestic violence are real people with dreams, talents, and loved ones. People like Carrie Hardin, whose names deserve to be spoken and whose stories deserve to be told.